maximum security ward in Bellevue Hospital last night after brutally stabbing 2 nurses and a custodian to death. Strobecker is extremely dangerous, brutal, and unpredictable.
It's not over yet.
Hey guys, this is Week Communications, and welcome to my review of Mute Witness. Mute Witness is a 1994 film directed by Anthony Waller. He also wrote the film, and it's a thriller. I wouldn't really call it a horror movie, even though it is on the Fangoria's list of the 101 most unheralded, underrated horror movies. I wouldn't really call it a horror film. It's definitely more of a suspense thriller than a real horror movie. So I wouldn't really call it a horror film. Anyway, I gotta thank CampbellFan22 for sending me this. I actually had a copy of it, but I decided to keep one copy, and I'll sell the other copy or whatever, see if we can get something for it. But anyway, this movie I've been curious about anyway because it was on the Fangoria list. And you look at the critics' reviews, it's like 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's got a 6.8 out of 10 on IMDb. And so I was definitely really interested in the film. I wanted to check it out. I saw the trailer. I liked it. I liked the idea of a woman who's mute, who can't, who's in danger, who's being chased by these killers. I mean, she can't scream. She can't call for help. I mean, it's pretty scary. It makes a terrifying scenario even more terrifying. And at the end of the day, I gotta say that I liked the movie, but I didn't love it. And I think mainly it's because Mute Witness for me is a movie of two halves. It's a tale of two halves. It's a tale of an excellent, chilling, nail-bitingly suspenseful first hour or so, the 96-minute running time, which is just thrilling. It's a thrill ride. It is non-stop thrills. It is some of the best and most thrilling sequences in a suspense thriller I've seen in years. It's really well done, really well handled, really well directed, and this is from the guy who directed An American Werewolf in Paris. It's hard to believe that the same guy who directed this directed that piece of shit sequel, American Werewolf in Paris, which looks like a shitty music video on MTV. The style he shows in here, the flair that he has for the visuals is really, really great. It's almost Dario Argento-like in the way that it's handled. And it's shocking to me that he goes from this to An American Werewolf in Paris. It makes me wonder if Hollywood Pictures handcuffed him or something, because you do not see the same type of visual flair in that film as you do in at least the first half of this movie. Suspenseful, thrilling, exciting, and straightforward. Straightforward, not very complicated, and very entertaining as a result. You have this character, I like the idea that it takes place on a movie set. The opening of the film starts out with, I think it was kind of a nice little bit of a humorous moment. And it starts out with there's a murder scene being filmed. Well, you don't know it's an actual scene in a movie being filmed. You think it's a real murder scene. But then you figure out that the actress is overacting and she's taking forever to die and falling all over the place. And then you see somebody on the side, the camera pans to the side and see some crew members drinking some alcohol. And then you cut, and then you realize you're on a film set, that was a pretty clever way to open the movie. And then as the opening goes along, this main actress just takes forever to die, and she's just overacting. It's actually pretty funny. And even the director is like, I told you to give me more, but not that much. It's too much. Cause she's like falling all over the place, pulling the curtain. She's so over dramatic. It is funny. And then you get introduced to the main character of the film, this special effects worker. She works on the special effects. Her name is Billy Hughes, and she's mute. and she's played by Marina Zudina, who's excellent in this in terms of her performance. And she doesn't know any English, and she didn't need to because she's playing an American who's mute. But it was an interesting casting choice. But I thought she did a great job performance-wise playing this mute special effects employee. She's not really a special effects artist. She's a crew member, special effects crew member, and she helps with the blood effects and stuff like that. And so what happens is she ends up because she's pretty much the main character of the film. So what happens is she ends up having to stay later. She's invited to this party the director has. And the director I thought was kind of a fun actor performance. Andy, played by Evan Richards. And her sister is married to this guy. Or she's a boy, or he's her boyfriend. And her sister is played by Ripley, her sister Karen. And I liked her too. There's a little bit of their running time, a little bit of their screen time I think could have been cut a little bit. But still, I didn't mind their characters. And pretty much what happens is Billy, she forgot to get a mask that the director needs for a shoot later. And so she has to go back to the studio and get it. So she goes back to the studio, and she takes a while to look for it, and it takes too long. She gets locked in the studio alone. So she thinks. She thinks she's alone in the studio, which would be kind of creepy. It's a big open space, and there's nobody but herself there. She's had to stay there overnight because she's locked in the studio. Then she hears some noises, and she goes over and sees that there's some of the same crew members who she saw earlier. One of these guys is shooting some sort of movie, and it looks like it's another sort of horror film or whatever. This woman is being held down on a bed, and this guy she's flailing around, and this guy's recording her. Well, with the camera. Well, she realizes something isn't right, and she's hiding. She manages to see what's going on from like behind the vantage point where the director is looking at, and she sees that this woman is actually looking like she's genuinely scared. Like she's really afraid for her life. Like this isn't a game. This isn't fake. This isn't a movie. And then she sees one of the killers, the guy supposed to be the killer, is holding her down, pulls out a knife, and he stabs her brutally to death. And blood everywhere. And of course she's scared shitless. And then when she runs away, she knocks something over. So then now she's really in trouble because the killers then spot her, and then it becomes a really thrilling suspense ride. Because she's running away, and it becomes a game of cat and mouse, where she's trying to stay one step ahead of the killers in order to stay alive. And I really like the way that those sequences were shot. There's even a scene where she runs back into the set, and the lights turn on, and she's running through these different sets, and it's totally like a cat and mouse game. She's a rat in a maze, and it's a really, really well done, well edited, well shot sequence of events. It's thrilling. She ends up hiding in an elevator shaft in one scene, really tense, and she ends up realizing that she falls down an elevator shaft where they also throw this trash, and she finds a dead body there. Her head is right next to it, and she can't scream because she's mute, but she's still terrified. So she just has one of those open mouth screams. And then it just builds and builds and builds, and finally she ends up falling off of this railing because she's being chased by the killer. And one of the killers, she falls off the railing and then lands in a bunch of these empty film canisters. And then her sister and her boyfriend come in to help her out, and she calls the police, tries to get the police there. And the film also has unique too because it takes place in Russia, which is kind of it was originally supposed to take place in Chicago, but it was going to cost too much. So the director Anthony Waller decided, okay, let's do it in Russia. And so the Russian police are called. They come in and they try to see what's going on. And she's being held down at this point by one of the killers, but eventually he has to let go because the police are coming. And so Billy ends up trying to, convict these guys. She saw them kill a woman, And so she tries to get the police to investigate him, and they do. And in a clever gag, one of the killers, who actually is the same guy on the crew, the actor who plays the killer in the movie in the beginning of the film, is actually the real killer in this movie, which is another interesting sort of touch. And so he ends up grabbing a knife, and they're trying to make this argument that it was just a show. It wasn't real. It was all fake, and that what she saw was not a real. It was a special effects test. It wasn't a real murder. And so one of the guys, the real murderer, takes a knife and starts stabbing the director, and the director's like, ah! And of course, you were kind of tricked too. But then you realize it's not really a real. He's not really getting stabbed. It's a fake knife with a blood tube on it. And so this convinces the police that they are not killers, but still, Billy is saying there's a dead body. There's a dead body in the trash, in the trash. So they go and look in the trash, in the elevator shaft. They don't find anything. They find clothes that are blood on them, but, it's fake blood. It tastes like sugar. So it seems like these guys covered all of their tracks. And they get let out, and the cops go away and don't really press any charges. They do take a film canister, though, which they think might be a snuff film. And then you find out that there's a plot line going on where there's this undercover cop guy, and he realizes there's some guy named the Reaper who's played by Alec Guinness in a cameo. And this guy, the Reaper, is this guy who gives people money for snuff films, pretty much. And they think they're going to watch a snuff movie, and it turns out it's just that over the top, overlong death scene that was filmed in the beginning of the movie. And even some of the cops in the back of the theater can't, stop themselves from chuckling at it. Which, that's a nice little bit of levity, a nice bit of humor there. And then, but since they get the fake film, they think nothing to it, but really, there really was a snuff film that was filmed. These guys are not innocent, and they actually end up killing a security guard because he ends up seeing that there's a skeleton being burned. There was something burning in the furnace, and he finds that there's a human skull in it, and then he gets killed. His dog gets killed too, which is kind of unnecessary. They kill the dog, and they also kill that guy. And then what happens is the Reaper comes in, and they give him, I guess, is the snuff film, the actual film, and they ask for the money, and he says no money if there's no money because there's a witness. So no witness, if there's witnesses, no money. So now the killers have to find a way. They find where Billy's address is, and they go after her. And then the film still maintains a suspenseful, thrilling pace, and it's got a little bit of levity here and there, but not a lot of it. It's not to the point where it's a farce, and it ends up, culminating to this showdown between the killers and Billy Hughes while she's alone in her apartment, helpless and so on. And there's a scene and she keeps in, a lot of people kind of have a hard time believing her. Her sister does, though, sympathize with her, because she's saying that I saw her eyes. It was totally real. It was the eyes of somebody who knows that they're going to die. And it's kind of hard to, forget that. And she's having flashbacks, and she's in the bathtub, and she has a hallucination of the dead woman coming, back sort of like to life as a ghost haunting her through the window. And she wakes up, and then phone rings. She goes and answers the phone. It's her sister checking in on her. She says, "I'm fine, just had a bath." And I like the way that this film handles the whole way how she's able to communicate, even though she's mute. She has this like a computer program set up where she can put the phone on hold for a little bit, and then the computer program will speak for her with a computer voice. And so she says, "Fine, I'm fine, I had a bath, I'm going to go to bed, you should too." And then she hears a knock on the door. She goes in to look at it. Her sister's even like, "Hey, you can't, you got to look at that. It's not like, you got to see who's knocking on the door before you let anybody in." She looks in, doesn't see anybody. She tries to unlock it. She locks it, but then, she realizes one of the killers is there. And so, but she locks it real quick before he's able to get in. And then she's trying to call for help, but there's these other people in the apartment don't speak English, and they're dragging her on forever. And it gets really nail-bitingly suspenseful when one of the killers ends up taking a drill, and he's slowly unscrewing the screws, for the lock, for the, of the apartment door. And she's helpless. She can't scream for help because she can't scream for help because she's mute. So they're unscrewing it, and it's really tense. And the score by Wilbert Hirsch really does work and really adds to the suspense as well. It really kind of felt like an old school sort of Hitchcock score. And they finally drill the bolts on the door, and they break in, and they're going after her, and it seems like it's helpless, but she manages to fight back enough. She ends up killing the killer, the guy who did all the killing. The director guy is the one who's still left alive at the end, but the guy who did all the killing, he ends up getting electrocuted. She knocks him in the bathtub and throws a hairdryer in there and electrocutes his ass. Kind of a cheap looking visual effect, but I could deal with it. It was kind of cheap looking though. And it was a very low budget though. This movie's made for like $1.5 million or something. Very low budget. And the film did a pretty good job, I think, with a low budget. And did nothing in the box office. It was made in 94, but it didn't even come out in theaters until like 95 and 96 in the United States. And so anyway, so she kills that one guy. She thinks she took out the other guy, but he gets back up, goes after her because she thinks she knocks him out with a flower pot. But he goes after her. It looks like he's got her cornered. And then the undercover cop guy comes in and saves her. And then the movie starts to go downhill from there, disappointingly. I love the first half. I really do enjoy it. I find it enjoyable. I find it thrilling. I find it exciting. I find it well acted. I find it well directed. I find the cinematography to be at points really, really top notch. And I just find it to be all around worthy of all the praise that it gets. But after the undercover cop saves her is where the movie falls apart for me. It's still entertaining, but it just feels like a completely different movie. Hence what I was mentioning. This is a tale of two halves. First half, excellent, thrilling, suspenseful. Loved it. Second half, it becomes a farce. It becomes something that feels like it belongs in an FX movie. It feels like something that it just doesn't. It feels like a completely different movie. It just switches tone in like a matter of seconds. It goes from suspenseful, but a little bits of moments of humor, but they work for what what the film was trying to do. They're not too cheeky, and that's the problem. The film decides to become too clever. It decides to, hey, I'm clever, let's go one step further, and it just doesn't work. And what happens is it becomes more of a farce, it becomes more of a humorous thing, it becomes more of a joke, and jokey vibe. It deals with the Reaper, and there's some disc that has information that might implicate him, and you have this back and forth with the undercover cop trying to work with Billy to find the fucking CD, and then you also have the American couple, Billy's sister and her boyfriend, the director, having to like deal with some hijinks. And the director, the guy who was in on the snuff film, he ends up getting shot by these guys who work for the Reaper or acting like police officers. And the Karen's, not Karen, who is Billy's sister, and her boyfriend have to fight back. And then there's some neighbor downstairs who lives in the apartment downstairs who's upset that they're making so much noise. It just becomes like, what is this? And then you have the whole. I really slowed down the film for me. It just had a great pacing, really, really breakneck, and then it just comes to a crashing halt. It decides to be a fucking farce for some reason. And then you have this whole thing back and forth sort of sequence of events with the undercover cop who takes in Billy, and then she thinks that he might not be who he thinks he is, so she handcuffs him to the steering wheel and gets out of there. And then out of nowhere, like literally comes another bunch of Reaper's men in a car to try to run her over. And then she ends up getting back in the car with the undercover cop. And then throughout the whole last 30 minutes of the goddamn movie, he decides to keep going back and forth with the whole, is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Is he a good guy? Is he a bad? He's a fucking good guy, okay? Stop trying to be more clever than you are, movie, because I know that he's not a bad guy. Stop doing it like it felt like 50 fucking times at the end. And the moment where it kept going with the undercover cop trying to explain about what's going on, do I need the fucking CD in order to implicate the Reaper, and then she ends up fucking handcuffing him to the wheel, just slowed the movie down considerably, and it just didn't feel like it belonged in this movie. It felt like it was tacked on. And then the climax of the movie is lackluster. All it is she ends up goes back to the studio because she remembers that the CD was one of the things that got knocked down when she knocked over the coat rack when she was running away from the killers in the beginning of the movie. And now she remembers that the CD was the thing that slid underneath the door. So she goes in with the undercover cop guy to go get the CD, and then it does the whole thing. Is he a good guy or bad guy again? Which, of course, is not the case because he's undercover. And she gets the CD. He gives it to one of the bad guys. He gets it back from one of the bad guys. The Reaper shows up. The undercover cop lets Billy out into the open. She gets shot to death, which you think happens, but it doesn't. She doesn't die, which I gotta admit I didn't mind that. I thought it was a nice use of the special effects gags, with the blood squibs and everything, because she's not really dead. But it still was unsatisfying. And then what happens is her sister comes in, and I didn't mind the scene where she beats the shit out of the undercover cop because she thinks she killed her sister. And then, of course, she goes out and goes to check on Billy, who she thinks is her dead body, but she wakes up. And then she apologizes to the cop guy. He's like, it's okay, it's all right. And then what happens is the cop guy gets in the car. Billy's like, no, there's a bomb in there. And then he gets out of the car just before it blows up. And then Billy talks about having a dinner date with the guy. And then that's the end of the movie. Because the Reaper left after he thought she was dead. And I can understand, okay, why they want to fake her death, because the Reaper is a very powerful person and whatever. But still, to be honest, I thought, even though that was kind of clever, I really would have preferred more of a satisfying ending where Billy's the one that gets the last. She like, for example, after the scene in the apartment, she, instead of getting saved by the undercover cop, cut out that entire fucking storyline. I don't need it. Instead of that, have it so she finds a way to get away from the guy, the director guy. She gets away from the director guy. And how about she ends up running through the streets of Moscow, and he's chasing after her at night, and she finds like an abandoned house or whatever, and it becomes a final last game of cat and mouse. Harkens back to the really suspenseful great moments from the first half of the movie. And it establishes consistency. It establishes consistency versus inconsistency, which is the second half of this movie is inconsistent. It's inconsistent in tone, it's jokey, it's cheeky, it's trying to be funny, it's a farce, and it's not suspenseful, and it's not really thrilling, and it just feels like it doesn't belong. And instead, you bring back the suspense, the reason why this film works. The reason why it works so well in the first half. You bring back the suspense and you end it with that type of suspense. You end it with her one-on-one with the director guy, and maybe somehow in the abandoned building she finds some gasoline or something, tricks him, throws gasoline on his ass, lights him on fire, knocks him out the fucking window to his death, and that would be a hell of a finale, and I love that. I'd be like, man, this chick's not only mute, but she kicks ass. But that's, she fended for herself well enough with other guys. She electrocuted him in the bathtub. But no, we had to have her not be able to fend for herself and prevent herself from being killed. We had to have the undercover cop guy come out of fucking nowhere, save the day, and then drag the film down with this farcical undercover cop plot line with a fucking computer disc and so forth and so forth. I'm like, this isn't James Bond. This isn't FX. This isn't Hudson Hawk. This is Mute Witness. This is a movie with a very serious looking fucking cover art. When you look at this cover art, do you think farce? Do you think that it would end on some jokey kind of lame bullshit? No, you don't. So that's the thing. Shitty shift in tone, which pissed me off. I was like, what is this crap? And that gets overlooked too much. But 80% of Rotten Tomatoes, a 6.8 out of 10 on IMDb. It's fine if you love the movie. It's fine if you even love the second half. I don't care for the second half. It's watchable. There are some things that were clever about it, like the way she faked her death and some stuff I had fun with. But at the end of the day, I could totally do without all of that for a more satisfying conclusion. And the way it concludes is not satisfying at all to me. It feels like a typical Hollywood ending. It feels cliche. It feels like completely unlike what the movie was, I thought the movie was building up to. And I just don't think it's very satisfying. And yeah, I mean, like I said, just bring it back to the cat and mouse suspense game that was in the beginning of the film. And the first hour or so of the movie, where it worked, where it was great, where it was memorable, where it was excellent, where it was thrilling. And that's where the climax should have brought it back to that. And it didn't do that, and decided to be more clever than it really is, decided to be cheeky, and I think it fell flat on its face. It went high up. It's like a roller coaster that was a fun ride all the way up to the top, and then it just fell. It just fell. Like it fell off a cliff. It just lost all its momentum and just came to a crashing halt. Came crashing down to earth, and it was disappointing. But anyway, I really don't know what to say about Mute Witness, except it was rated out of 5 stars. I'm going to give it 3.5 out of 5. I think it's all it is an above average thriller for me. And the reason why is because it has such a great first half, but then the second half is just average. Average second half with really infuriating shifts in tone and just really not nearly as memorable as the first half that preceded it. So I really don't know what to say about Mute Witness, except thanks for watching my review, and I will see you guys later. See ya.